Welcome in to Locked On Knicks, or perhaps we should say Locked On 8 wins straight. The Knicks notched their longest win streak since the 20-21 season and do it in dominant fashion, 132-94 over the Golden State Warriors. Gavin, what are we getting into in this one?
Jalen Brunson's orchestration, Immanuel Quickley catching fire from three, Jericho Sims rebounding, and basically everyone else playing well along the way right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. And we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at thestrict.land. And he is Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. This is Locked On Knicks, and we are talking about the Knicks' big win, Gavin, 132-94 over the Warriors. When we were talking pre-show, I said to you, I was like, I feel like this one we're just going to have to bounce around a lot, because what are you going to really get into if you do a game recap of a game where they won by about 40? And I also said this on our little so I was on Locked On Sports Today with our buddy Peter Bukowski.
Great show.
Also did our little like Locked On Now video that we do after every game. And my main thing was like, yeah, you could try to diminish this game by saying like, oh, but Steph Curry was out and Andrew Wiggins was out. And yes, those things are true. That said, the Knicks have lost this season to much worse teams than the Warriors without those two guys, the defending champs without two of their better players. So I'm still taking this. The fact that they still looked as dominant as they did, and the fact that they won their 8th straight on national television when it would have been very easy to just kind of roll over and kind of flub this game, returning home no less too, which has been kind of a weird place for the Knicks to play for not just this year, like the last couple of years. But I was thoroughly impressed once again by how they played. And it's kind of just a lot of the same themes we've been seeing during this win streak.
Yeah, Alex, I think you can just look over this whole winning streak, and that's a theme that applies, right? The only two games over these 8 that they played against teams at full strength are Cleveland and Indiana, or I should say playoff teams at full strength, Cleveland and Indiana. And yet, generally, lots of NBA teams get easy stretches of schedule, right? Very few win 8 games in a row. And it is because of a defensive culture, a defensive consistency that is now been established on a night-to-night basis. And it's because the Knicks, I mean, you talked about it a whole lot in that win over the Pacers, right? They have 3 legitimate game-changing players right now in RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson, and essentially the perfect cast of role guys to fill in every little blank. I'm going to take a victory lap on Quentin Grimes. I'm going to continue to do it. Like, I think there's a million different places we can start, but the guy just, he allows Jalen Brunson to do what he does, and he allows RJ Barrett to do what he does by guarding the toughest defensive player night in and night out. I mean, today it was a lot of chasing Jordan Poole around, and sure, Poole hit his shots. He had his success. Grimes committed a few stupid fouls, but this is a guy who's coming off a 43-point game against the Raptors, and Grimes pretty consistently held him in check while hitting super tough threes on the other end of the floor, attacking closeouts, play in and play out with vigor previously unknown to mankind. And there are all these stats out there about how RJ has gotten hyper efficient since Grimes has entered the starting lineup. And this was something I heard Nekias Duncan point out on the Dunker Spot podcast. This was something our guy DJ Zulo pointed out on Twitter. The fact that RJ doesn't have to guard the toughest guy on the other team game in and game out. And I say that not because Grimes was the main fixture or the main point of this game, but to me that's just it's a microcosm of why this team is working, why everything is clicking right now. The stars are allowed to go be stars because everyone else on this team is filling in every little gap for them. And in turn, those stars are encouraged, like Julius Randle specifically, to play harder and get in the muck with those other guys and play with that same infectious effort in every facet of the game. And it's obviously it's working to perfection for the Knicks.
Yeah, it's so funny. Two of those things even came up when I did Locked On Sports today.
Hmm.
You know, when I was asked like what has led to this win streak. You know, there's a lot of different things, and I think most of it comes down to like if you want to look at it at the most macro level possible, it's like tough closeouts, tough defense on one end, finally making some threes on the other end, and sharing the ball. You know, those are like the two like big overarching things. But that defense, it's so interesting because it's like maybe there's a bit of a chicken or the egg thing here. Is it like, did Randall motivate himself and then in turn some of these other guys? I think I'm more inclined to believe what you said. It's like if you've got a guy like Quentin Grimes out there busting his butt every single play on defense, it's tough not to also want to like cover up for your teammate there. You know what I mean? Or like not cover up, like not make your teammate cover up for you all the time, I guess I should say.
And when they need it, cover up for them. It's both, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Like if Grimes is playing great defense, but someone still manages to get by him, you want to be like, oh man, he deserves that.
Yeah,
So
I got your back. Just like
let me run in and play good help defense here. And I know that you'll rotate out to my man because this is what we've established. And you can say the same for Mitch too. You know, Mitch is one of the guys that consistently is always, you know, giving his all on defense and playing like the emergency valve, you know, at the end that can, you know, kind of stop a guy that gets by, you know, the first layer of defense. But that first layer is better than it's ever been. And the other thing that I had brought up too is like this shortened rotation with RJ now spending more time with the second unit because the shortened rotation dictates that someone needs to. I think that that's been really helpful too, because just like what you said with Grimes being able to, you know, kind of take the other team's best defensive assignment and take a little bit off of RJ's load there, where RJ then will maybe be taking the second best perimeter player out of the starters. When he's in there with that second unit, he can take the third best perimeter player a lot of the time because you've got Deuce and Quickley out there that both are playing that hounding style of defense. That leaves RJ to like a much easier defensive assignment, which is, I think, why or part of the reason why he's been able to thrive so much is sort of that leader of the second unit and expend so much energy kind of being there like alpha there. There's so many things to point to, you know, it's just like we're getting to the point now where we're actually starting to be able to look at this and be like, okay, this isn't just a small little blip of the season anymore. This is now a 10th of the season. Like, what are things that we can take out of this? And so it's pretty cool to be able to sit here and like analyze these things on this level and be like, wow, I mean, this is not an insubstantial win streak here. You know, this is real deal stuff, and they're starting to do some stuff that even, you know, if they eventually lose a game, which they will at some point or another, at least I think so. You know, once they eventually lose a game or two, there's definitely stuff here that's been established. As long as they don't let that loss eventually rattle them, they're going to have a really good foundation here, I think, going forward for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a good time to look ahead, and to me, where the Knicks can set up a really premier matchup this Sunday. Now, I think odds are they probably lose one of the next two games just because Toronto, even though it's at home, and the Raptors, man, they're really going through it right now. I saw they played Pascal Siakam 48 minutes the other night in a game that I don't think went to overtime against the Warriors. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but man, but that team is tough. They are long. I could certainly see the Knicks just having a bad shooting night and that being the one they lose. But then they get a Chicago team where, and it's hard to beat a team 3 straight times in a little over a week. But man, they just have the Bulls number right now. There's a world where you walk into that Christmas game, that Christmas Day game against the Sixers, having won 10 in a row, and Joel Embiid, James Harden just want to rip your face off and just want to put a stop to it and say, nope, not again, not another one. And that crowd at MSG on Christmas, man, I obviously just in general, I'd want the Knicks to win the next 2 games, but I just want to see that scenario play out because that would be, I mean, it would be the biggest game the Knicks have played. Maybe will be regardless since losing Game 5 against Atlanta 2 years ago.
Yeah, it could be a real showdown that day. I mean, as someone who loves watching the Knicks on Christmas, even though it feels like they lose most of the time, uh, I certainly am looking forward to that game, regardless if they're riding the 10-game win streak or not. But you want to talk about a fever pitch? I mean, that things are going to be absolutely insane if they reach that point. In fact, I might be a little overwhelmed and maybe even a little anxious going into that game. Thinking that there's a lot about to be going on, and this makes it a perfect time to remind everybody that today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. And BetterHelp is a great service that it offers you an opportunity to get the help that you need without having to necessarily go through some of the steps that can make therapy uncomfortable sometimes. Life doesn't always come with a user manual. So when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. Navigating any of life's challenges can make you feel unsure, whether it's a career change, a new relationship, becoming a parent. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere, 100% online. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist, and if things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right. And we're back on Locked On Knicks, and we want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports today as your second listen. I'm on there today. If you can't get enough Alex,
No excuse.
That's the place to be. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Gavin, I wanted to kind of give a shout out to something. Again, we're sort of just bouncing around here. There's a lot to be excited about right now. One thing that stood out to me in this game is something that was a smidge different, and maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe there was another instance where this lineup has been seen before, but it was the first time I really noticed it and paid attention. Mitchell Robinson and Jericho Sims sharing the floor for a minute, and Hartenstein and Sims have been sharing the floor quite a bit lately. That's with Obi out. Sims is kind of fit into those minutes, and also Randall, I think, is taking a little bit of what Toppin was playing previously. But you're seeing Sims out there with Hartenstein, and Hartenstein, he hasn't been shooting much this year, and he hasn't been shooting well this year. So it's probably for the best that he's not kind of utilizing the floor stretching quite as much this year. But there's at least some semblance of a stretchy player at the 5 with Hartenstein out there with Sims. So you could sort of say, like, all right, maybe that's why it's working. Except then Sims and Mitch were out there, and I was like, when I saw them both on the floor, I was like, oh, all right, what are we about to see here? And surprisingly, and look, take the level of competition into account, I think James Wiseman was on the floor for the Warriors at that time, which he's obviously had his struggles since getting drafted, and now playing in the G League this year as a second overall pick and all that good stuff. But I still thought the Mitch and Sims alignment looked pretty good. Like, maybe it's just because they're both lob threats. They're both like elite rebounders, and like two of probably the best offensive rebounders maybe in the entire NBA.
Alex, sorry to interrupt. I just looked it up.
Yes.
So Sims doesn't qualify, but per 36 minutes, Mitch is third in the NBA. Sims is fourth in the NBA in offensive rebounds.
There you go. 2 top 5 offensive rebounders.
Yeah.
If you go by per 36. I mean, it seemed to work weirdly. And Sims has been pretty adept at sticking with whoever the other team's 4 is. And I mean, that meant at some points with the second unit there, like guarding like Kuminga, he's a quick dude. He's like more of a wing the way that he moves and the way that he handles the ball, and yet Sims was keeping up with him. I think, I mean, look, I'm not advocating that this should happen all the time, but just like we always say, like, oh, if you want to play speedball for a couple minutes, maybe you should look at Randall and Toppin. Like, if the Knicks just need to get some boards and play some defense, maybe this 2-man alignment is worth looking at sometimes, which is not something I ever thought I'd say if you had told this to me like 2 months ago.
I think it's funny that this lineup came out against the Warriors because in some ways it's giving them a taste of their own medicine. Because for years, the way teams guarded Steph and Draymond, where they were saying, all right, we are just not going to guard, or just Draymond by himself. We're just not going to guard him, right? You can't really shoot. You look like you have a backpack on every time you take a three. Go ahead, shoot a million. And Draymond said, all right, that's fine. I'm literally going to go screen for the greatest shooter of all time. And because you're syncing off of me, you're not going to have a help defender to step up. And the Knicks can weaponize that same phenomena with Jericho Sims, because when he's standing on the perimeter, obviously no one is going to respect it. But then he can go up to RJ Barrett and be like, hey, it's going to be 2-on-1. And RJ can either pop for a three or get to the rim. And we saw that a couple different times today where RJ drove. Then Sims's defender and RJ's defender converged. RJ missed a tough shot at the rim. One time Sims got a put back dunk. Another time Sims saved it from going out of bounds, passed it to RJ, and RJ kicked it out to IQ for three. It is creating mismatches. It's creating scrambles. I think over time and playing better teams, you're going to see adjustments that make it very, very difficult for those lineups to be tenable. More so Sims and Mitch, just because you can really squeeze that. While with Hartenstein, I mean, we saw it today where the Knicks used him for finally what we've been begging for all season, right? In a short roll situation where IQ drew two defenders, was using every shot, little slip pass to Hartenstein drive, dump off to Sims for a dunk. So Hartenstein gives you a little bit more flexibility. Mitch and Sims, not so much, because neither of them can really create. Neither of them are super comfortable with the basketball, although Sims maybe in a couple of years will be there. But what's really exciting, Alex, is those two are just so dominant on the offensive glass. You put them with someone like RJ, whose greatest skill is even if he misses, it's impossible to keep him away from the bucket. You are just going to get scramble situation after scramble situation. You're either getting open dunks or you're getting one of Immanuel Quickley or Quentin Grimes or Deuce McBride, all of whom are just draining right now, wide open from behind the arc. So it's kind of this perfect synergy. And we were talking about a pre-show. You have in that lineup, you have right now the best offensive rebounding center in the NBA, Mitchell Robinson, and the best offensive rebounding power forward in the NBA in Jericho Sims. So it's kind of unfair for opponents.
Yeah, speaking of things that are unfair, Immanuel Quickley, when he's shooting as well as he did in this game, pretty unfair. Although perhaps maybe my favorite play from Quickley was they had Steph Curry briefly on commentary, I think in the second quarter.
Yeah, second quarter. Mm-hmm.
And they like right as he was getting on commentary, the Knicks were bringing the ball up the floor, and Quickley just threw this like laser beam of a pass to Jericho Sims, and Steph was just kind of like a little slack-jawed looking at it. Like you could tell that even impressed him. He was like, and of course, the announce team also had to be like, "Whoa, look at Jericho Sims," and Steph was just like, "Oh," and he was like openly cheering for his team too, obviously on the thing. But it was just kind of funny seeing his reaction. But Quick had a great game. I mean, 22 points. He leads the Knicks in scoring. I can't believe we haven't really talked about him yet so far. But 6 of 10 shooting, 5 of 6 from three, 5 of 5 from the free throw line, and this is the ideal version of him, right? I mean, if he's shooting this well, he's amazing. I mean, that's been the whole thing this year. And that was, there was what was it, last week, a week and a half ago, when I was like, I don't know. Like I was starting to get a little worried about the fact that the shooting isn't coming around. A game like today makes me be like, well, shut up, idiot Alex from a week and a half ago. Like,
yeah,
he looks awesome. Like, I mean, this is just sort of the ideal Quickley game from the standpoint of pushing the pace, making his open shots, playing great defense. I mean, he really did it all in this one, and making, one or two flashy assists too. I thought this was just like a banner night for him.
Oh, I mean, I think this version of Quickley turns the Knicks into a team that could win a playoff series. I still wouldn't bet on it just because unless they're a top 4 seed, even if they are a top 4 seed, whoever they're playing is still going to have quite a bit more frontline talent than them, but he completely transforms, Alex, what the Knicks can do. And I want to talk more about that in just a sec. But first, what's coming. If you're watching on YouTube, it's betonline.time, betonline.net, is your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and World Cup. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. When I did both those things, I found the New York Knicks just 1-point favorites against the Toronto Raptors at home. This is disrespectful at this point. The New York Knicks have won 8 games in a row. Sure, are they due to lose? Sure. Did I talk about earlier in this podcast how they maybe likely will lose? Okay. The Knicks are a far better team than the Raptors right now. They're at home. Hit the Knicks money line hard. Bet online. It's where the game starts. And with that, we are back on Locked On Knicks. Immanuel Quickley. I'm sure you would say the same thing, Alex, but the Knicks are a completely different team when not just when he's shooting like this, but when he's willing to take those shots, when he's willing to fire from distance with abandon. Because I mean, today, and this could be a whole podcast, this could be a whole part of the segment, but I brought up on Twitter the idea that are we sure Obi Toppin is going to be in the rotation when he's back healthy? Are we sure the Knicks might not be looking to trade him in lieu of Quickley? And people rightly made the point like, hey, like this team has dropped, I think it's on 21 spots in bench scoring with Toppin out coming into tonight's game. Like they need that punch even if they lose a little defense, and that's fair. But Quickley, as kind of a one-man engine on nights where he's shooting like this, can make a big difference. And I noted it before, but I think putting him with a bunch of offensive rebounding talent really weaponizes him because it allows him to just hit those relocation threes. And we saw him tonight really aggressive about seeking those out. I mean, I already noted the one that he got off Sims's rebound, but he had another one where he drove into the lane. Draymond stymied him. And then IQ said, all right, like instead of forcing the issue, shooting a bad shot, which he's done at points this year, he just kicked it out to Grimes, ran back out behind the arc, cut the ball right back. Draymond didn't follow him, put a 3 on the Warriors. And then just some of the craftiness, even inside the arc, where he pumped Anthony Lamb out of his shoes to draw a foul with with 5 minutes left in the third. Did the same thing at the end of the second quarter. I'm gonna do a throwback, Alex. He put Lamb in booty jail at one point. We haven't gotten to say that in a while. And hit one of his classic runners. So it was just one of those nights where everything was working for the New York Knicks. His final 3 was just taking advantage of Jericho Simpson drop over and over again. He made the right decision, was super aggressive, and the Knicks are a different team when he plays like that.
Yeah, they certainly are. And they're a different sort of team when they're moving the ball the way that they have been during this win streak as well. I was kind of curious about this because when I saw the statistical leaders flash during the game at one point, it said like Brunson at the time, I think was leading scorer with 21. This is like pretty late in the game. RJ had 5 assists and Randall had whatever he ended up with 12 rebounds. And I looked at that assist number and I was like, oh, weren't they just talking about like how many assists the Knicks have in this game? And it's like a fairly high number. And how does that jive? You know, that RJ's got 5 assists to lead the team. Well, they did end up with 27 assists for this game. And yet, yes, RJ did lead the team with 5 assists, although it was a 3-way tie also with Brunson and Randall. So much for the mid 3, maybe midway between 10 assists each. But so those 3 end up with 5 each, but then you have Grimes with 4 assists as well. Hartenstein with 3, and 2 of which were like just insane. It made them call Hartenstein, what was it?
Jokic of the East.
Yeah, Jokic of the East, Jokic light, whatever else, like on the broadcast. Quite an interesting comparison there. But I mean, the passes, the one was just this like laser beam to Quentin Grimes, like almost like 3/4 court, maybe even slightly more than 3/4 court.
That was insane.
Just crazy. And like in traffic, it was like if like Peyton Manning in his prime was throwing it out to Quentin Grimes.
Yeah, the hand was up. It went right through it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, just like perfectly placed. And then another really nice heads up off a jump ball, just heads up play. This one was more like Kevin Love-esque, I think, like prime Kevin Love. Just head up immediately and saw Deuce streaking down the other end, threw it to him, and went for an easy Deuce dunk. I guess my overall point with all this is just like, so 27 assists is a very impressive number in that that would rank tied for 5th in the NBA this year in assists per game, like by team, which the Knicks are not, I don't think, currently going into this game. Going into this game, they were 24th and averaged 23 assists per game. So like that's a pretty marked improvement for them. But I think it's even more impressive that this wasn't just like a game that Jalen Brunson got like, 11 of those or whatever. I think this game was maybe one of the greatest testaments so far to the fact that the Knicks are just kicking the ball around like crazy. And no matter who it is now, they're like, they always have their head up and they're always like, okay, do I shoot or do I pass? And everybody is making those quick decisions that we used to lament, like, oh, if only Julius could do this, or if only RJ could do this, or whatever. It seems like they've kind of all just had that like click light bulb moment all at once. And I thought that this game, with how that assist distribution played out, was just kind of a fun little statistical way of illustrating what we've kind of been seeing on the court so far during this win streak.
No, I think it's a great point. I mean, I want to run through all three of those guys because what they did tonight, what they continue to do is special, and it starts with Jalen Brunson. And I remember when the Knicks signed him, my big question was, I mean, outside of his defense, obviously, was how is he going to be able to calibrate the scoring versus the playmaking? Is getting to be with Luka Doncic. He didn't really have to do that at the NBA level, and I mean, he's just an absolute assassin, and in all these games, his ability to turn the tide, like the second another team has just the glint of momentum, like Jonathan Kuminga had this big dunk in the second quarter, and then the next three plays for Jalen Brunson were a floater, and before that he'd hit a wide open three, and then Mitch came up to set a ball screen. And then this was Chris Paul-esque from Jalen Brunson. He basically redirected Mitch to dive to the rim, faked the little dribble handoff with Grimes, got around his guy, drew Mitch's guy, and then just dropped it off to Mitch for a dunk. And it was that over and over again. Like he had another one where he got middle, just baited Draymond to step off of Julius Randle. And then in the past, like earlier in the season, not like years ago, that would have ended with Brunson doubled. He would have kicked it out to Randle. Randle would have pump faked, two dribbles to the elbow, contested elbow jumper, clang. Instead, Randle immediately recognizes that Green was not looking his direction, cut off of it, got to the rim. Brunson hit him and one layup. So it's the fact that Jalen is tearing people apart, but off of that, all these other guys are hyperactive and wanting to leverage it. And that is at the most basic level, the secret to a successful NBA offense. It's an orchestrator that draws the attention of the entire defense. And then it's teammates who can punish that either with their gravity or with their activity, and ideally both. And the Knicks are, again, not against great competition, but they're at the apex of that, at least tonight.
Yeah, and speaking of gravity and activity, I think we're seeing quite a bit of that out of Deuce McBride suddenly, who seems to be kind of finding his 3-point shot here. He ends up going, what was the total in this one? I just had it
4 for 7 from the field, and then from 3, 2 for 5.
2 for 5 from 3. I mean, I thought that he did a really good job of a lot of times with the second unit in this game, and I know they kind of alternate this depending on the game, depending on how the wind blows, but it seemed like Quickley was deferring to him a lot in this game to kind of bring the ball up and set the offense up, probably in an effort to find Quickley more spot up looks, considering how great Quickley was shooting in this game. And I thought that it worked to great effect, and I thought that McBride made really good choices, did a good job setting the offense up. More specifically, again, was making his 3-point shots. Just making a couple of those is going to make all the difference in the world for him, because the second that he starts getting a little more respected out there, even if I'm not totally confident, even though, okay, physically, I think that McBride has the ability to get all the way to the rim and, do some stuff, but he clearly still does not feel great about that yet, sort of like how Quickley didn't for a while. But similar to how Quickley used to have his floater, McBride has that really killer mid-range game. And so I would love to see if he starts getting respected from three, he might have a pretty nice little like one dribble step inside the 3-point line, pull up mid-range shot that he could go to, which isn't efficiency wise the best thing in the world, but put in a position where you've got someone closing out super hard on you, it's a good open shot rather than a super contested three. So something to keep an eye on. I don't know, but I've really been liking how he's playing, and I think over his last 5 games or so, he's been shooting a decent amount better.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it looks like his last 4 games prior to this one, he was 1 for 5, 2 for 2, 0 for 1, 1 for 4. So still not like fantastic, but if he can even just shoot like 32% or something this year with room to get better, I think it portends pretty well for his future and for his ability to stick around, because he's just such a good disruptive defensive presence that, I mean, I don't necessarily want to put him on the level a Marcus Smart or something like that, but the effect is similar in that his defense is so good that even if he's a low 30s 3-point shooter, it doesn't really matter, because he just has to do just enough for you on the offensive end to make up for for lacking there enough to like say, okay, that the stellar defense is enough to still keep him out there. And I think he's well on his way towards that right now.
Yeah, I mean, after a 1 for 17 start for 3 this year, he's 8 of his last 22. So that's 36%. If he's 36% on high volume and not afraid to shoot him, to your point, that is more than enough for him to find a lot of success. But yeah, Alex, before we finish, I just wanted to touch one final time on Randall and RJ Barrett, because I just thought this was another game where neither of them shot the lights out, but they did everything you can possibly ask them to do. And for Julius, part of it is sometimes what he doesn't do. Like, just he's getting so much more respect as a shooter now. Like Jalen Brunson literally got a wide open 3 when Randall set a screen for him because they went under because they didn't want Brunson getting to the lane, and Randall's defender basically stuck on him because he didn't want Randall popping out for a wide open 3. And then just little plays defensively. Like he just jumped high to deflect this Clay pass that kicked out to a turnover and a transition attack for the Knicks. And just little like smart plays all over the floor. Like we talked about that backdoor cut already. His physicality, going after Draymond Green, drawing a foul on him, then hitting a turnaround over Draymond, attacking mismatches with Ty Jerome. Like he had one where he got just a running floater on him near the end of the second quarter, pivoting into a dribble handoff when the Warriors would drop off him. And it was the same phenomenon I'm talking about with Sims and RJ, where it's like, all right, if you're not going to guard me, I'm going to set up Jalen Brunson for a wide open 3. And then one final one that I really loved. He's just playing really well in space defensively. There's a play where RJ got, I think it was third quarter, RJ got caught up on a screen, and Jordan Poole was curling wide open to the rim. Draymond Green had the ball, and this was just great IQ from Randall. Instead of like sticking with Draymond or just kind of throwing his hands up in the air and be like, all right, it wasn't my fault, it was RJ's fault. He just sunk back onto Poole, took away that, and dared Draymond to take a long 2, and Draymond didn't, and RJ recovered, and it was just a savvy play. And then RJ Barrett, like it was very similar with him this game, where you can tell like it might just be from, again, not having to guard the best guy in the other team. There was a stat out there: Quentin Grimes is the highest matchup difficulty in the NBA since he's gotten into the starting lineup. And so RJ, his load is lighter, and you could tell his legs are at a different place. Like had this ridiculous Euro and one on Anthony Lamb, where it's like, all right, that was vintage RJ. And then in the third quarter had a personal 8-2 run where it was just him being like spry and attacking the rim when there was an opening. And then his touch is just so much better. Like he had a play where he just kind of worked Ty Jerome down to the rim and put in a hook shot off the glass, and just not a shot he would have hit earlier in this year. So I can go on and on and on, Alex. There's a million more examples for both those two guys, but they are transformed as players, and it circles back to my opening point. I think everyone else on this team is making their lives as easy as possible, and give all the credit in the world to RJ and Julius, because they're stepping up to the plate and saying, all right, like you guys are giving me the chance. I'm going to play my butt off regardless of how I shoot. I'm going to make smart plays, and it's going to lead to a whole lot of winning. And that is what has happened. All right. And with that, that'll be it for this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. We'll be back tomorrow night after the Knicks play the Toronto Raptors, hopefully talking about 9 in a row. But until then, he's Alex. I'm Gavin. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks. Peace out.